Ladies and gentlemen, I am Shahbazi, the captain of Flight 742, which landed without nose gear safely on October 18, 2011, with about 80 Russian passengers and 40 Iranian on board from Moscow to Tehran. Imagine thousands of passengers board a plane hoping to arrive at their destination safely. They trust their captain, and this places a huge responsibility on his shoulders. I, as a pilot, treat my passengers like members of my own family. And from the moment I take off through to landing, feel a tremendous sense of responsibility to use all my experience, abilities, and knowledge to pilot the plane home safely. My concerns and deep feeling towards my passengers from one side and they trust in me from the other side makes me speak to you who surely have traveled by plane at least once in your lifetime to reach your destinations and families, and hence have trusted your pilot. The biggest aviation threat and concern in my country is to fly civilian airliners which have 60 years old technology and are technically worn out. These old airplanes prevent me and the other pilot from doing our job correctly and fulfilling and responsibility towards passengers' trust in us. Unfortunately, sanctions imposed by Western countries on civilian airlines in Iran have caused a considerable number of plane crashes and led to the death of 100 passengers. The sanctions also have resulted in technical failure through the last decade due to dilapidated parts in the aircraft. The principle of using equal air transportation facilities and services all around the world is surely a right. It is not fair for ordinary people become victims of political tension between governments and lose their lives to such issues. Depriving a nation from secure flight by withholding spare parts which are crucial to its safety could not be further from the slogans of human rights and war security, and certainly are not consistent with the principles of democracy. It is not acceptable to endanger some people while promising peace to the others, or use people's well-being as leverage to impose pressure on their governments to reach certain political goals. Unfortunately, international human rights organizations have chosen to remain silent against such unjust act towards Iranian. I think all of you share my view that the ends must not justify the means in making a political decision. The United States and European community have threatened Iranian and foreign passengers' lives by ignoring the rules and regulations mentioned in UN Human Rights Charter, and in order to put pressure on Tehran, have imposed a strict sanction on aircraft spare parts from abroad. I would like to draw your learned attention to that all of human rights organizations, Red Cross, and faithful politicians to judge whether it is acceptable or justifiable to threaten civilian passengers' life in order to impose political reform on a government. I am sorry to say that it is not only the human rights organizations that have chosen to remain silent on such cruel sanctions regime imposed on Iranian civilians, but international aerospace organizations also follow in their footsteps, and this be their conduct has caused many tragedies involving the loss of thousands of innocent lives. The reason for establishing organizations such ICAO, IATA, SAFA, and agreements like Chicago Convention with the United States and other Western countries as its primary founders and signatories were to prevent such unjust and unfair treatment of some countries. These organizations should abide by the rules and regulations and act responsibly toward the safety of passengers and airspace safety of countries. IATA is a trade union of airline companies, which is non-political, non-governmental, and its duty is to provide services to airline agencies. One might ask whether This negligence or silence is not considered as acceptance of these inhuman sanctions which run counter to their own agreements and human rights declaration. It obviously violates international rules as well as putting the credibility, independence and existence of these international organizations at risk and threaten airline passengers. Isn't it wise to draw a line between conflict and problems between governments and safety of nations and to separate political disputes from harming peaceful civilians? Isn't this attitude closer to peace and friendship among countries and world security? To impose a specific political view, sanctions should not be placed on technology and airspace industry of country to threaten the life of civilians. Even in World War I and II, depriving civilians of medicine, food and life was considered inhuman. It has nothing to do with sanctions. Respectable leaders of ICAO, IATA, SAFA, and human rights organizations and fair politicians, dead people do not need help. Support civilians while they are still alive in order to fulfill your obligations. Red Cross officials, are you waiting for something to happen again? Isn't prevention better than cure? I personally condemn violating innocent and defenseless people's rights who have nothing to do with the political disputes between governments in any part of the world under any pretext or by any authority or country. Let this speech reach all human rights activists and people so they listen to Iranian people's voice. Today, because of my campaign on worldwide support of my website at captainshahbazi.com, I have the honor to convey the message of our peaceful and humble people, a nation with an ancient history. I ask you, who are the main decision maker and lawmaker of the world, to reconsider this type of sanction placed on Iran. And let's not forget the people in a universal community are bound together, and problem or sorrows of one group of people or country will ultimately affect the other group of country or country sooner or later. And now, a word with American decision makers and lawmakers. Those of you who talk about democracy, security, and freedom in your speeches, those of you who talk about a new world, who approve a huge budget to fight AIDS, who worry about ozone layer depletion, and who seems prepared to travel merely to save only one life. Mr. Obama, how am I supposed to believe your sincerity when you send message of fraternity and friendship to Iranian people on the eve of Persian New Year Nowruz, yet the next day move to endanger the life of my countrymen by extending the sanction on selling civilian airplane spare parts? Mr. Obama, I hope you act upon your famous motto, change, and politics aside, consider human rights standards and lift the sanction on sales of civilian airliners and spare parts to save the life of people. Perhaps then Iranian will believe your message of fraternity. Many thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for this opportunity. And